We are in week number 2 of our March read in the prophets. So that means we're working on Hosea as our
For the big read.
for the big read. So keep that one in mind. Be taking some time to go through the book of Hosea. Try to maybe read through that at least once a week. And then the prophetic theme for March is God's choice of Abraham and Israel. And our read from this week is from Isaiah 63.
Yeah, it's a shorter reading.
It is, and it sounds like a gripe.
Well, it is. I mean, it's gripe, maybe lament, maybe even a little bit more. Asking God to look down from heaven there and take a look at what His city and His people have become, and do something about it. Where are your zeal and your might? But going back to our theme for the month, which is God's choice of Abraham. Part of the grounding of the lamenting voice here is verse 16, where they say, "For you are our father," talking to God.
Right.
"Though Abraham does not know us and Israel does not acknowledge us." And so, Abraham and his family have the covenant with God, but it's gotten so bad that the Abrahamic people, the Israel, does not know God anymore. So this righteous remnant, this righteous voice lamenting the condition of God's city and God's people points out, kind of the tragic irony that Abraham doesn't even recognize, Abraham collectively doesn't recognize a righteous man anymore.
It doesn't seem like they are God's people anymore.
Right. They're not living that way, and it just, and the voice is wondering why God's not doing anything about this. Thus the lament, the gripe angle that you are talking about.
Isn't that interesting that it's God's fault?
Well, at least that God is the one who ultimately has to do something about it. At the end of the day, you did have Mosaic judgment in God's toolbox. The Mosaic covenant, spoke of God's judgment on covenant breaking, and so but the tragedy is, when Abraham no longer knows his God, so to speak, and that's what the righteous man is really shocked by, and then again, God needs to do something about it.
So you see the prophet as kind of frustrated with where the people are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the need, what. So how long are you going to let this go on?
Right.
Are you going to do something about that?
Right.
Boy, that lament sounds so familiar, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. And what's funny about that is, again, chapter breaks are in the wrong place, right? As they're always in the wrong place. And so if you look at chapter 64, verse 1 there, and look at that as part of the continuation of the psalmist's desire, "Oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down." And what's fascinating is that language is essentially used at Jesus' baptism of the parting of the heavens. If my memory serves me, one of the Gospels uses the same Greek verb there that's used here in the Septuagint, in the Greek translation of Isaiah 64, to almost seem to connect with, there was a voice at one point of the righteous person or the righteous remnant wishing God would come down and do something about it. And the baptism of Jesus, where God has come down, and now Jesus is entering into his messianic ministry, and the Spirit is coming down upon Jesus. God has rent the heavens and come down to deal with this fact that Abraham no longer knows him, and that the righteous man suffers because of it.
So one of the things that I think is important to see as we wrestle with this theme, and also really what's going on in Hosea, is the fact you've connected this with Jesus, which demonstrates that whatever Israel does, the Abrahamic promise is never forgotten.
That's right.
God will still, through the seed of Abraham, Genesis 12:3, bring a blessing to everyone, every family on earth, every person on earth in Jesus Christ. And that isn't dependent on Israel cooperating with him in that process.
And that's the crucial thing about the Abrahamic covenant, which is why, like in Hosea chapter 1, there is Abrahamic language about, despite the unfaithfulness of Gomer and the illegitimate children that she has borne, and Hosea's heart being broken over that. It's I think it's verse 10 of chapter 1 there in Hosea. That he then invokes Abrahamic language. Yet you will be as this the sand of the seashore, the stars of the sky. That and it could, to your point, the Abrahamic covenant will be fulfilled by God no matter what the failure of Abraham's descendants. But so the fact that Isaiah here, the righteous man, the voice of the righteous man here in Isaiah 63, that's part of why he turns to God, and also part of why, again, how bad can it get when even Abraham doesn't know God anymore? But there's still a line of hope there, because under the Abrahamic covenant, God's purposes of blessing the world are going to happen no matter what at this point. And so there's always a kernel of hope once you start referencing Abraham. You start talking about Moses or the law, not always some hope, because the law prophesied exile for disobedience.
Right.
It's got a much harsher. But the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, once Abraham did his part, once David did his part, the sons could fail, but God's purposes for an ultimately righteous ruler and an ultimately nation of blessing to the world, that's going to happen.
And so I see in that something that I think is really significant for us that I think we need to pay attention to as we make our way through the prophets this year, and that is that that our future too is staked on the promises to God, that God will follow through and do what He says.
Yeah.
And so we need to read stories like this, or we need to watch as God works out His plan, even dealing with a rebellious nation, that God can still accomplish what is His will. And so with reference to our promise that Jesus is going to return and there is a place prepared for us with Him, we need to have absolute confidence in our future, because we see how God works out His plans, and He always does, never fails.
Well, and along that line, if you're looking, because it is a relatively short reading this week, if you're looking for a little bit of extra reading even besides Hosea, you can go and read Galatians chapter 3, where in that chapter, Paul actually shows how the Abrahamic covenant was fulfilled by God through Jesus Christ, the blessing that He brought. So thus, out of Abraham, God did make a nation, God did give them land, God kept all these promises, and then ultimately, Abraham puns off of the seed concept. That seed ultimately was really singular, the seed, Jesus Christ, and now the world is blessed. And so in a sense, you and I are sitting here, sons of Abraham by faith, as Paul calls us, and again in Galatians 3. And we're able to be so because of the forgiveness of salvation in Jesus. So the Abrahamic covenant came through. God came through in terms of the Abrahamic covenant. He did. He blessed the world through Abraham, even though sometimes, like here in Isaiah 63, again, the voice of the righteous man, I can't believe even Abraham's fallen down into this mess collectively.
Yeah, it seems like a long way away. And the other thing I was thinking about is how Christians ought to take more solace in that fact, because I think sometimes we are too consumed with how things are turning out right now in our culture. So we fret over elections and who's going to be in the White House, and that becomes the stuff that consumes us.
Right.
Instead of the fact that the world isn't our home. We sing that song. We just don't live that way. And and we're looking for something different, a better city.
Yeah.
The Hebrew writer says. So we our future is staked elsewhere, not in the outcome of the year by year or election by election cycle of this country. And so not only should that give us peace and comfort, but it also give us direction and mission that instead of being consumed with championing our candidate, we need to be championing God and His promises and pointing people to the future that is absolutely certain.
And again, that's what the voice here does. At the end of the day, I wish God would come down and do something about that. That needs to be if you're feeling frustrated about the condition of the country, and so on and so forth, the right response is, in a sense, we're still waiting for God to come down from heaven again in the second coming. Let's make that our real cry of heart, rather than, getting our guy elected or, whatever other earthly solution we're looking at for the things that plague us.
Yeah.
We wish God would rend the heavens and come down. We're looking for the second coming.
Yeah, God's still working out his plan, even when there's a mess
No,
down here.
absolutely.
So there's a thought to carry as you are making your way through Isaiah 63, the last part of that chapter. Maybe do a little bit in Isaiah 64 because there's more there, and take a peek at Galatians. A lot of extra reading you might circle in as you're spending your time in the prophets this week, thinking about this theme of God's choice of Abraham and Israel, and some things I think that says for me and you. May God bless your read this week.